Hello, my name is Andrew. This is another presentation of Non-Linear Existentialism. Title being Possible Solution to Kant's Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics. Subtitle being Science of Metaphysics. The gist of this presentation is when I was putting together the previous presentation concerning certitudism, namely Nietzsche, God, and certitudism. I was just thinking that when Nietzsche was doing this work for the gay science, he of course was destroying all external standards, and through the next work, Das Buch, Zarathustra, he was actually creating a new perfect standard in the physical realm, being Superman, but he still was creating a perfect standard. And of course, it goes back to the idea of what non-linear existentialism is about, that uncertainty and stability is created, and then the system creates new certainty and stability. And Kant seems to have created it through a thing in itself, which is part of metaphysics. And for Nietzsche, it was the creation of the Superman. Both of them are creation of non-natural perfect states. And I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of analyze how Kant did it. So you can see the table of contents, and we'll just dive right into it. So this is kind of a mouthful, but of course anyone reading Kant, there's a lot of mouthfuls. So the question is, how can a priori, before experience, synthetic amplitude processing initiated by physically developed intuition of appearances and experience, not only imbue the person with an appreciation of time and space, but also possibly in tandem with other intuits and logical requirements, produce pure transcendental states? So the idea is that Kant creates a situation where things are linear, and then suddenly he gets things that are nonlinear. The linear would be inputs to the system, and nonlinear would be these pure transcendental states. Pure meaning that they transcend the experience. And a priori for this one is systems within the body, intuits, physical parameters, physical systems within the individual that allows him to experience space, extended bodies, as it were, and have them at a specific frequency of experience, which is going to be time. I did this, the critique of pure thought in 2013. This is going to be the Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics, which he did afterwards to try to explain what he did in a critique. And I went after this one because it's a lot easier to work with, I can tell you that much, than doing the critique. But of course, they're going to be hopefully being equal, and I believe that they are in some way. So initial question, Kant's metaphysical inquiry. Second part of the main transcendental question, how is pure natural science possible? So the foundation of the intuition of which I've become conscious, i.e. perception, which pertains mainly to the senses. This is where he's going to be going through, try to explain or restrict what a person can know. And these passages is saying he's basically, a person's restricted to what they can sense and nothing more. And he has to make sure that we're aware of that external appearances in space gives us idea of extension, and our ability to understand time, perception at a certain rate, is going to be through an internal experience, meaning time is determined by an internal element, and extension of our physical bodies are through interacting through the environment. Second part of the main transcendental question, how is pure natural science possible? The mere universal form of intuition called space must therefore be the substratum of all intuitions determinable to particular objects, and in it, of course, the condition of the possibility of the variety of these intuition lies. Variety meaning logical varieties. When he starts mentioning the word synthetic, it is amplitive, meaning added to, but it's very logical, very restricted, at the beginning of his inquiry into how is metaphysics possible, or even if it is there. Through this one, we also continue with Kant's metaphysical inquiry, Second part of the main transcendental question, how is pure natural science possible? Section 22. The gist, when I underline things, these are not, he underlined in his own work. I underlined it just for highlighting it. The sum of the matter is this: the business of senses is into it, and that of the understanding to think. Section 21a, experience consists of intuitions which belong to sensibility and of judgment, which are entirely the work of understanding. This is when you get start. We have linearly processed inputs into the system through natural processes, time, natural process experience. Uh, Perceiving things, and then what we get into next is going to be categorizing them through judgments and understanding, put him in the categories. He has a wonderful display of that in his works. And so Kant basically says something comes in, these perceptions are basically ordered. We're ordering the perceptions. That would have been the best way to say, instead of categorize, ordering them into categories, meaning restricting them, refining them. So you get the idea that for Kant, the first part of his undertaking is saying information comes in, we interact with external inputs, and we order these internal inputs. How does this kind of relate to non-linear existentialism, or a more biologically considered model, non-linear existentialism? What innate neurophysiological ability does a person have that allows them to be able to be aware of and react to their own concepts of space and time, as well as produce certainty where none is or could be present? This is more to the point. We have to consider that we begin with experiences, and experiences are going to have uncertainty in them. They're going to cause uncertainty within ourselves, and we're producing uncertainty, or through restriction of information coming in, that there could be incongruencies and such developed, and that could be uncertainty. But again, it could be uncertainty physically, uncertainty or instability through form and such and so forth. But we do create certainty, and how could that actually be present? What is metaphysics to Kant? That's kind of the other thing, because everything's vested within it. But it happens, fortunately, that though we cannot assume metaphysics to be an actual science, we can say with confidence that certain pure a priori synthetic cognitions are actually given, namely pure mathematics and pure physics, for both contain propositions which are everywhere recognized as hypothetically certain, meaning that they're absolutely certain. Like we have mathematical concepts that have complete certainty. We have pure transcendental physics. So, and I believe this should be stated quite firmly, that this is not what happens at the sensory boundary, but further away from it when processing has occurred, when thought has occurred. But that's what he got. So the idea of metaphysical cognitions is that we absolutely know it's there, it's stated within ourselves. We don't see it from experience, it's there a priori, that there are perfect conditions. We don't see these perfect conditions from externally, but we know that there are perfect conditions. That's what metaphysics for him is. When I compare all transcendental ideas, pure ideas, the totality of which constitutes a particular problem of natural pure reason, compelling it to quit the mere contemplation of nature to transcend all possible experience, and in this endeavor to produce the thing in itself, called metaphysics. I think I perceive that the aim of this natural tendency is to free our concepts from the fetters of experience and from the limits of the mere contemplation of nature. So what he's getting here is that, again, that there is uncertainty and we can create certainty. He doesn't say how it is, but this is kind of the idea, is that he's freeing our concepts from the fetters of experience. We have experience that is disorganized, we create organized, we overly create organized. The information coming into us is disorganized experience, the world is disorganized, we create organization. So he doesn't really say how, is it you go go logical, but you're going to such an extent that you create things that cannot actually exist. Reason therefore appears to be conceptual area that will allow the linear to become non-linear, illogical, but how does this occur? Spontaneously or incrementally? So if the inputs to the system are tied very strongly to the external, and suddenly they become something they cannot be metaphysically, pure states. We do not experience pure states, but we somehow create uh, pure states. So, related question: can metaphysics be formalized into a science? So, this is another one that first we have: how do we have a priori ability to synthetically, purely synthetically, deal with our experience with reality? The other one is that can metaphysics, is there any aspect of metaphysics can be turned into a science? Can metaphysics be understood, described, rationalized into a formal system that adheres to the scientific method and thereby be considered a science into itself? We have the scientific method. I think we're all aware of this. Is observation is very important. Experimentation, analysis. It's a cyclic you continue doing over and over and over again. So, from the scientific method, the problem is, according to Kant, this is very difficult to do because for science, you actually have to observe something. And for him, metaphysics has to deal with something beyond experience, the thing in itself, things like that, things that are beyond experience, a priori, before experience. So, how does one do that? Non-linear existentialism is a possible solution to the initial inquiry. Not the one of science, but the initial inquiry, which is bring about a priori. It could be suggested that the consistent inherent physical modulation of the neuronal frequencies imbues a person with the ability to process information at a specific rate. Our system gives a specific way, and this is important because when he was talking about judgments and such, under the auspices of understanding that we have a manifold, a presented display at a specific, uh, kind of a conjoined experience of reality. And through the mechanism I propose for V1B for FAM is that this is what it does. It has a system experiencing at a specific rate. And so you're conscious of everything at that specific rate because it's bound. Due to this incongruency, interference, instability is also physically added incrementally to the process signal, leading to the modulation of amplitude of the neuronal impulse. Further, this instability may be reduced in other areas of the central nervous system which may have stable neuronal patterns. So, V1B of the central nervous system of the cerebral cortex, causes the instability. It is after the higher layers because you need that stability. So there is fidelity with the external information and such. But but as the system begins to isolate itself and further process the information in incremental nonlinear amounts, very, very small, but enough to possibly make it nonlinear, that when it goes into the patterns, if it doesn't need further, these patterns after the fact can be considered to be logical. You can have logical judgments, logical understanding, logical reasoning. Logical meaning that the thing is that they can be related to the external environment, which is not perfect. You don't have perfect states. But if you have enough isolation, enough insulation from the external environment, and more processing that can be considered nonlinear over a period of time, then in this one you have, in cases where the reduction is excessive of uncertainty, this may lead to the creation of absolute perfect patterns that are unnatural, pure understanding, pure reasonable, or other words, transcendental. So the idea again is that because the proposed V1B and its ability to produce instability and congruency and such, it adds a minute but additive amount if the system continues on in the same process of the same signal, the conjoined signal, that it can become more and more nonlinear, not at each individual processing, but over a period of time, and over a period of time, that entire stream becomes more and more uncertain. I'm sorry, more and more certain, and becomes more and more unnatural, more and more metaphysical. So, what is metaphysics and nonlinear existentialism? Basically, what I mentioned, but the underlined is the most important thing. And due to this, the person also has a stronger tendency of any organism to produce real or manufacture certainty within its neuronal patterns to overcome this uncertain state. Faced with such a situation, metaphysical studies try to determine what standards can be trusted. So again, this is what I mentioned before, and this is from Separation and Integration, Introduction to Non-Linear Existentialism, that faced with an environment of uncertainty, that you got an environment which is presented in a certain fashion, comes in the system, and we have a certain amount of decoupling due to the instability within the V1B. So it takes that and allows the system to try to recouple it in a way that increases certainty. So you've got an uncertain, basically a certain environment that has uncertainty within it, has things that we can't easily order. So it comes into the system, and through V1B, the instability that it creates, and adds to it even further, and allows the decoupling to occur, and allows ourselves to actually to recreate it in some ways. And if there is such a desire, a strong enough desire, then you can actually lead to more and more uncertainty. It's more and more uncertainty until it's basically unnatural. The Superman, the thing in itself. So again, I must repeat, you got an environment that has a certain amount of order and such, but it's not perfect. It comes in the system, and through V1B, frequency amplitude modulation, it gets to a certain amount uncoupled from that. And if the reasoning on put onto it to reorder it, they can be reordered in such a way, certainty to it, there's certainly going to be considered to be reasonable amount of certainty, not perfect, but if we need more and more and more of it, then it can actually be recoupled into a state that's unnatural, because you want to actually have a very high amount of certainty. So questions. In Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics and Non-Linear Existentialism based on idealism or realism? The next one, if abilities of sensing time and space are inherent in Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics and Non-Linear Existentialism, why did not the former produce a definition of metaphysics while the latter did not? And latter did, sorry. Why does non-linear existentialism conject things themselves can be known while Prolegomena does not? Basically, both non-linear existentialism and Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics, Kant's, is both of them are not pure idealism like Berkeley. They're more transcendental or critical idealism, but as you quote, that Kant tries to differentiate himself from idealism as is normally understood. My idealism concerns not the existence of things, the doubting of which outside idealism in the ordinary sense, since it never came into my head to doubt it, but it concerns the sensuous representations of things to which space and time especially belong. Regarding space and time, and consequently regarding all appearances in general, I have only shown that they are neither things, but are mere representations, things being things in themselves. But the word transcendental, pure, which for me never means a reference to our cognitions of things, but only our faculty of cognition, was meant to obviate the misconception. Yet, rather than give further occasion to this word, I now retract it and desire the idealism of mind to be called critical. So the gist of it is, and for nonlinear existentialism, that yes, there is not, we have to, the sensory apparatus is there to sense and to be developed by the internal environment. And because of that, there is an understanding that the internal environment does exist. Whereas for Kant, it's going to be restricted, we'll talk about this later, by everything within the sensuous sensory apparatus to a point. But for nonlinear existentialism, this allows for things to go beyond that. Kant seems to do that as well, but again, he fluctuates between saying it and not saying it, to the point being that even the awareness of things in itself is kind of illogical. He's talking about bounds and limits in his book, saying that you can go up to kind of the surface between what is possible and what is not possible, and because that you know that there are things beyond itself. But I really don't buy into the argument very strongly. Next one, if the abilities of sensing external appearances in space and experiencing time are both inherent in Prolegomena to any future metaphysics and nonlinear existentialism, as well as linear and nonlinear elements, why did the former produce a biological plausible definition of metaphysics while the latter did not? So this is kind of to the entire thing. The Kant is a very strictly logical thinker, meaning that he has a strong sense of linear causality and therefore restricted, countermanded by any overtly stochastic solutions. Nevertheless, as per his analysis of reason, which was in the next passage, he was very close to the suggestion on linearity. You look at it and go, wow, it seems pretty plain, but not to him. In addition, this might explain why Kant does not consistently employ the word concept of synthetic. Sometimes it appears to mean logical amplification, while other times creative amplification. Logical means you could take the components and if you move them around, yes, you'll get the outcome. Creative is that you make new components. But he did not seem to realize that. This passage is going to be where it shows that he does not allow for probability, saying that we have concrete, certain, absolute conditions that we always must speak to him in that fashion. So it is quite interesting to read this and try to get inside of Kant's head, to saying that we have a logicians and he's just trying to get things that beyond the restrictions of the inputs. And he just somehow says, well, if we arrive at a perfect state that I cannot experience, but I know it's there, um, he just has so much difficulty with trying to. He's reasoned that you have to have non-linearity with linear thought, but he just can't get beyond it. And again, the idea is that he's using reasoning all the time to say that if there is something beyond reason, then I know it's there. I can't be there, but I know it's there. But that's pure conjecture. Where in other places he says that he knows it's there. So he can't have it both ways, but he appears to want it that way. And this is where he really, really seems to, with the reasoning, and to think that it is reasoning within ourselves is going beyond what can actually occur, which is unnatural. He allows it to occur, but it says, well, we know it's there. Reason comes to it, reason creating ideas. But I don't know. It's very difficult to understand how he can actually split his reasoning so finely. Anyway, I'll read the passage. There is no danger, however, of the understanding spontaneously making an excursion so very wantonly beyond its own bounds into the field of mere beings of thought, understanding being a linear idea, unless being impelled by alien laws. But when reason, which cannot be fully satisfied when empirical use of the rules of the understanding is being always conditioned, requires a contemplation of the chain of conditions, then the understanding is forced out of its sphere, meaning out of the linear. And then reason partly represents objects of experience in a series of so extended that no experience can grasp it, partly even when a view to complete the series, it seeks entirely beyond experience, nomina, meaning the thing in itself, to which it can attach the chain, and so having at last escaped from the condition of experience, reason makes its whole complete. There we go. Reasoning, which comes after perception, which comes after judging and understanding. And then you have actually reasoning producing ideas. That reasoning can create a condition, a certain condition, because of uncertainty before it, to say that this could be something. And there it is. Then we have a natural ability to do this. And somehow Kant can make more of it. Why does non-linear existentialism conject things in themselves can be known, while Prolegomena to any future metaphysics does not? I've said this before, but The evolutionary aspect of non-linear extension conforms with the idea that limitations of a person can be overcome in the tools the person makes and use the information gleaned from them. Kant's treatment limits understanding to the person and not to what they can do, which is to say it is analytical, not synthetic. What I did in separation, integration, nonlinear extension was come up with the idea of what energy was. And so if we have a system, our system presently as we are right now, that can only sense a certain amount of energy, I can see that we can't go beyond that because the thing in itself would be all forms of energy from the object in question. But if we had tools and such, it can go beyond our failings of our own flesh and the sensing of our own flesh, and those can be used to get everything of the object. Then we know everything about it. We know the thing in itself. Conclusion. Metaphysics, therefore, can be understood as a study of uncertainty and insentient beings processing and thinking in themselves or in others, of themselves or others, as well as the production and removal of such uncertainty, which also considers what standards can be trusted and why. So metaphysics would have why is there uncertainty and why is there certainty, and what does the individual or the environment or the people or the group or the culture do about that? Then we also have another one, the related question that was brought up about it as being a science. Metaphysics could be seen as the science of studying how changes in the level of internal interference in the various components of the receiving apparatus of the inverter, be it as a result of internal or external factors, modulates the observer's dependence on the environment. And this is kind of originally, the original idea for non-linear existentialism came to me in 1992, and it wasn't until approximately 2001 where I was comfortable enough with what I was thinking about to do my original paper on the significance of amplified macroscopic probability in the optimization of learning. I didn't want to just come up with the idea of metaphysics and such. I wanted to say how something they consider metaphysical actually has importance and meaning to ourselves. And so this is what I'm tying together that modulates the observer's dependence on the environment, meaning that the more they learn, the more they understand, the more they're capable, the less they're dependent on the environment. That's why I underline that also. You would see down on the bottom of the page of the linkage to the paper. And so it's trying to not talk about it as a metaphysical thing, but how having it within ourselves allows us to be more capable to evolve as a creature, society, as a person in the environment. So I think that's much more important. I mean, metaphysics is what we can consider of a science, but if it can't be linked to something important within ourselves, I think it has less meaning. So I thank you very much for your time on this. It's a lot of stuff to read and try to comprehend and understand. But whenever I was reading Prolegomena to Any Future Metaphysics, it was just that he would go up to the point of saying that there is a possibility of non-linearity, but because he constricted himself, because he's such a fervent logician, he logically explained to himself how we can know things that we shouldn't be able to know or could exist. Uh, I mean, you can argue either way, but of the two, I would think non-linear existentialism is more plausible. But I thank you very much for your time. Take care. Goodbye.